And okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Sorry for the delay. Ran into technical problems. Unfortunately, that always happens just when you want to go live. And this is going to be a discussion between Abdullah Samir and Brother Nadir Ahmed on scientific is in the Quran. Now, we've been hoping to have this discussion for a while now. Brother Nadir approached me and we agreed on a topic, which would be scientific miracles or scientific errors in the Quran. So we're going to try to cover both topics. We just decided that maybe we'll start with what I would see as mistakes in the Quran, and then we'll go to the other topic of actual miracles, maybe in another session. So Brother Nadir is, I believe he lives in the US, right? And he has done quite a few interesting debates in the past before. One of them, which I looked up, was with Richard Carrier and with a bunch of Christians as well. I didn't get a chance to see those ones. And with some other ex-Muslims as well, like Captain Disguise way long ago, the Rationalizer, and a few other people. So he's definitely had these type of conversations before. This is new for me, although I have been discussing, but never in this type of format. So I think this is going to be quite interesting. It's not a debate. We agreed that we're not going to call it a debate. What we're going to do is we're going to try to have a conversation, and we're going to try to see if we can kind of understand each other's ideas, if there's anything that we missed, bring out the ideas a little bit more in a kind of conversational style. So Nadir, would you like to introduce yourself, get started, and tell us about your position, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, so basically, is my voice coming out clear?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to share my desktop if that's okay.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, well, me personally, I guess there's really not a lot to see. I'm just basically by profession, I'm an IT professional, and I also engage in discussions with different people on various related Islamic topics. Can you see my desktop there,
Yep.
Samir?
Yep.
Okay, so really, as Samir was pointing out, it's a two-part discussion. We're going to talk about scientific statements in the Quran which agree with modern science, and the significance of that, showing that this was actually something which was, how could a man 1400 years ago have modern scientific information like that? So, but before we go there, let's talk about, are there any scientific miracles in the, or any scientific errors in the Quran? And I'm just gonna go pull up, you can see yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So how do I know that there's no, how can I just make such a brazen claim that there's no scientific errors in the Quran? Question would be, have you checked? I personally haven't, but others have, and I've seen their video. In fact, we could probably Google it. We could do, scientific errors in the Quran. And we see all these videos here of people trying to show that that there's scientific errors in the Quran, and I've had a chance to look at that, and I must say I was quite entertained.
How come my video's not on there?
Good question. Where are you?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, probably because you don't work for like one of those big think tanks. So there's a lot of these, like for example, this guy is a paid professional, David Wood, right over here.
Right.
So that's like his job. So there's a lot of think tanks which try to, how should I say, try to refute, attack, or mislead people about Islam, however the way you want to look at it. So it kind of brings me, and you may not be working for one of those think tanks, so thus you don't get a lot of exposure.
Right.
So that does bring kind of an interesting problem here, actually. And really, my evidence by saying that there's no scientific errors in the Quran is really only as good as them. And the truth is, they're really not very good. You're going to find a lot of logical fallacies and just weird statements they're making. And the vast majority of people who actually make these videos, they're not really very intellectual. They're more hardcore zealots. You can't even have a discussion with them. In fact, as I was telling about Samir, he was just a breath of fresh air that you could actually sit down and talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, those other guys, you cannot. They're way too hardcore in what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
The second problem with those guys, And if you see the majority of them, they don't read counter rebuttals to their arguments. There are a lot of refutations and arguments, like, for example, Call to Monotheism. There's a good website which refutes that. They don't want to bother reading it. A third problem is with all these, so-called, scientific errors, is everybody's just copying from the next person. They're not really going and doing research on their own. They're not like talking to people like myself. Hey, so how do you respond to that? They really don't care about that.
Right.
And they get offended, actually, if you say, hey, dude, have you ever like read the refutations to your material? They actually get angry. So this is kind of a breakthrough, that we actually found someone who is willing to sit down and talk to us about these so-called scientific errors in the Quran.
Right.
I think it's also important to point out that going back to, this is my last point, there are a lot of think tanks out there which misrepresent Islam. And I guess it's made headline news, you know, that these think tanks like the Gatestone Institute, this is an article I just want to kind of bring to your attention here, where even the media is pointing out they're making false and misleading statements about Islam. Another one of these think tanks is like Answering Islam, and the media and other people are looking and say, dude, you're basically submitting false and malicious information about Muslims. So my point here is, just to everybody, we really got to verify and check the information we're getting about Islam. So
Absolutely.
anyways, go ahead if you had anything, Samir.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, let's continue. So basically there's a lot of false information there's a lot of fake news online, let's put it like that. And I'm absolutely agree with you that we need to verify, we need to, don't just believe anything blindly. If you read a website, whether it's Answering Islam or Answering Christianity or Wiki Islam or abdullahsamir.com, of course, double check, verify. And that's why I actually leave the comments section open on my blog. So if you go to my blog, you'll see there's actually quite a few things people actually argued against me. So like, there's stuff on there that you would see, like, if any of the articles you click on, you'll see there's responses to them and people are going back and forth. So, but yeah, please continue.
Oh, well, probably if you wanted to kind of bring up what you feel is the
Okay.
Islam doesn't agree with science.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
And
Thank
you can, let's start with the Quran first,
Yeah,
because
I'm not gonna get into the hadith even. I
yeah.
thought about that a bit, and I'm like, we'll just stick to the Quran.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a few slides here. There's not much in here, but so just to give a little bit of a background for whoever's watching this for the first time and doesn't know me, I am basically an ex-Muslim for 3 years now. I left Islam, interestingly, because of the Quran and Hadith as well. But because what I found was, from my perspective, there was flaws in the Quran. Like, it seemed to me that there was nothing in the Quran that couldn't have been written by Muhammad. So what I was seeing was everything in the Quran, piece by piece. I used to have this belief that there was some sort of evidence in the Quran itself that this could not have been authored by Muhammad. I used to believe in the World Scientific Miracles thing. I used to believe the stories in the Quran were true stories, the story of Jesus, the story of Moses, Noah, all of them. And so what happened was, at some point I had you can call it a crisis of faith. I started to read about Islam, and I found that I found that there was things in the Quran which seemed to be incorrect. And so what I did is I looked into it, and I found out that there were actually issues. So one of the challenges of proving that the Quran has scientific miracles is extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. So the thing is that whenever we say that, let's say I said I spoke to God yesterday, you would right away be like, wow, that's interesting. Why do you say that? And your first assumption is this guy is lying, or he's, maybe there's a problem with his mind or something, or maybe, he had some sort of psychotic session, because we do see people all the time claim this. So what we have to ask is, what is the evidence, right? What is the evidence for this claim? What is the evidence that Muhammad actually did speak to Allah? So in particular about the scientific claim, and in particular about the Quran, Richard Carrier summarized it beautifully. with these 5 points, which I won't get into great detail because we don't have a lot of time. But basically, this is something that even the Muslim kind of apologetics movement, Ayala, Hamza Sotis, has kind of agreed to all of this in his essay, Scientific Miracles in the Quran, A New Approach. And in a bunch of his videos, there's no scientific miracles in the Quran. Basically, what happened with Hamza Sotis was he was dialoguing with atheists and different people, and he actually came to agree with the position that the old narrative, which had started basically in the 70s, the narrative that was funded by Sheikh Zindani in Saudi Arabia, where they brought a bunch of scientists to Saudi, including Keith Moore and many other people. And they had them there for a week, and they got them to say things which they found interesting in the Quran. Some of these speakers were interviewed by the rationalizer after the fact, after they left. And a lot of them didn't even realize that the words were being used to kind of prove the Quran was a word of God. So they didn't necessarily understand this was a context of what they were doing. Many of them, after the fact, spoke and said that, actually, the things that I said were not meant to be used in that sense, because the claim is not that the Quran's text is not that powerful that it couldn't be written by a man. So the first issue is the issue of borrowing. For example, the mountains has pegs, we find that in earlier books. The issue of triviality, as literature calls it, which is that, there was scientific knowledge that existed even outside of, people that claim divinity. So when you claim the Quran has some sort of miraculous knowledge, well, the question is, how did people that did not speak to God or did not claim to speak to God, how did they come up with this knowledge? So that's the second issue. The third issue is the scientific errors, which we're going to focus on today. The fourth issue is the issue of ambiguity, where a verse is kind of not specific enough that you can say that this is talking about science, right? And people will sometimes try to use that and to say, well, no, this is actually talking about a specific example, right? Like, for example, the mixing of the seas. That's one example that's being used to kind of show science in the Quran being miraculous. But the verse is sufficiently vague enough that it's not amazing unless it's specific, right? Because there's many vague statements anyone can make that could be used in a different way. And lastly, and I'm sure you'll agree with this one, is the issue of tafsir, which is, we should not, and I many Muslims would agree that we should not project our view onto the Quran. We should let the Quran speak for itself, and I think you would totally agree with that. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so the next thing I want to mention, I don't, like I said, I don't think we need to get into too much detail on that. But basically, I have two main points I want to bring up. One is the burden of proof, which is, by default, we can talk about scientific errors in the Quran, which is, when I first left Islam, what happened was, it started off as, oh, I have these problems with the Quran. I don't understand how, this seems like an error, this seems like a mistake to me. And I would go and talk to someone, and, like, for example, the whole Dhul Qarnayn issue. And then they would tell me, okay, well, here's how we can explain it. And so what would happen is, I would be like, okay, but what about this issue? And then what happens is, it becomes like whack-a-mole, and you almost feel like the guy asking you the questions is not sincere, because what he's doing is he's jumping from issue to issue to issue. So later on, I realized that when I thought about it, that I need to step back a bit and step back and ask, well, okay, never mind the mistakes in the Quran. Let's start from the very beginning. What is the evidence that the Quran is the word of God? Like what's the main argument? What's the main miracle? What's the main proof, right? And so if a person believes in God, what is the basis for that? And is this something Muhammad could have written? So that's basically, should we just start there, or should I go to the rest of my points? How do you want to do this?
Well, why don't you just, I guess we're just going to go back 2 minutes, kind of back and forth. I mean, no more than 2 minutes. Just bring up one statement in the Quran that you feel is contradicting science. Maybe
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still adopting a false historical narrative.
So hold on. I had a clip there. Okay, so I have two clips which I included in my presentation. One of them is this one.
Still adopting a false historical narrative, because people are saying No one knew this information at the time in the 7th century. That's not true. Let me give you some examples. Consider the setting down of iron. In the Quran, in chapter 57, verse 25, the Quran says, and we sent down iron. Yes, this is relatively true that in some meteorites you have iron ore, right? So iron was sent down from that perspective. Does that mean it's a scientific miracle? No, because you had the ancient Egyptians 1400 years before the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace. They described iron as ba and pet, which means iron from heaven. Right. This was like over 1,000 years before the Prophet ﷺ. So you can't claim miraculousness here.
Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second point I wanted to make was, I just want to give an example of what I'm saying. This is an amazing quote. Like, this was Plato, who was a Greek philosopher. He said, if man could soar high above the clouds, earth would resemble one of those balls which has leather coverings in 12 pieces and is decked with various colors, of which the colors are used by painters on earth in a manner that samples. So this was in his book, the Thesaurus. He talked about how he predicted that the earth would be a ball, right? And that was it's quite impressive how accurate this is, and this is far before Islam. So this is just an example of basically the issue of triviality, as literature calls it.
All right.
People refer to my article on moon sighting, okay? And these are questions to Yasser and to others. So which was created first, the heaven or the earth? The great Sheikh al-Shanqiti, the great scholar of tafsir, and my father's teacher, fantastic tafsir of the Quran. He spends dozens of pages on the Surah Al-Baqarah. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن سبع سماوات. Spends dozens of pages discussing whether or not the earth was created before the heavens or vice versa. Because some verses imply it's one way, others imply it's the other way. In the end, based on pure language and tafsir and this and that, no science whatsoever, he concludes firmly that definitely the Quran tells us that the earth was created before the heavens. Right? Even though the other verses which make it seem to be saying the opposite. You said that's definite. Are we going to accept that because he said so? Is the earth flat or round? You can look this up in Tafsir al-Jalalain, Imam Sayyidi in Surah al-Ghashiyah. وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. And to the earth which Allah spread out. Imam Sayyidi says that the earth is flat. And this is the view of the religious scholars, he says, ulama Shah. He says, however, they disagree with the ulama al-Hayya. The astronomers, Muslim astronomers say it's round. Religious scholars say it's flat. And Imam Sayyidi says the earth is flat.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna stop there. No, not again. Okay, so basically my point, you want me to jump into a specific point, but
well, I think you've given me enough to respond to.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me do this. Let me share my desktop, yeah, let's try to do just 2 minutes at a time. That way we can kind of do point by point. But yeah, let's do this. I'm just going to share my desktop over here.
So to summarize, basically my point is that even Muslims themselves are saying that the Quran is ambiguous. The Quran doesn't lead us to science. Science in the Quran is a false narrative. The knowledge of the ancients was far more than we ever expected. These are some of the points I'd like you to respond to.
Oh, sure. Can you see my desktop?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. No, so yeah, there are some people who have opinions. I would say majority of the Muslims I meet are actually convinced that there's science in the Quran. Not only that, but there's also experts, which we'll bring in. When we get to the discussion about where Islam agrees with science, we'll discuss it then.
Okay.
What I will agree with you is that there's a tremendous amount of propaganda out there. And our responses and counter arguments are being buried. And again, it's because of these type of groups like the Gatestone Institute and these think tanks like Answering Islam. Like, for example, a lot of the material which I bring, people say, well, why can't I find that on the internet?
Right.
Well, internet's a big mess. Like, for example, if I just do like Google searches on some of the so-called error claims, you're not going to find it because it's just buried with all the anti-Islamic propaganda. So that's a problem.
Right.
So the problem about borrowing, the two examples you gave are actually, they may be bad examples because iron being sent down from not being created on Earth is actually a scientifically correct statement.
Right.
So the other example about mountains as pegs, may not be the best example because once again, that is scientifically correct. So we could just do mountain pegs, and you will see just from these pictures, they actually um, do have huge like pegs in the earth. So then the question you said, well, okay, it looks like Muhammad is borrowing. Well, see, not exactly. The Quran kind of explained itself inside the following surah. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up over here. It says inside Surah chapter 5, verse 15, it says, O people of the scripture, there has come to you our messenger making clear to you much of what you used to conceal or hide of the scripture and overlooking much. So there is a lot of stuff which was revealed before, which is being hidden according to them. And like, for example, information, the infancy gospel of Matthew and or infancy gospel of Thomas and others than that. These are books, lost books, which the Christians hid and basically had church councils like the Council of Hippo to ratify the books they wanted.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just gonna say that wasn't my point. That was actually Hamza Soitis was saying that this knowledge was available much before the Quran. But do continue.
Yeah. I don't know Hamza very well, so it's hard to respond. But here we see also, which explains all this so-called borrowing theories. It says inside chapter 16, verse 36, and we certainly sent into every nation a messenger. Now, what that means is from India to China to Europe, prophets were sent to them. So much of their message, like the heavens and the earth and stuff like that, you will find and retained inside some of what they present as scripture. Right. So the message of God has been fragmented all over. So like, for example, the Noah's flood. This is a good example. Many scientists, modern day scientists say, wait a second, the flood narrative is also found inside pagan scripture. Well, here's a reason why, because guidance and I guess a prophet was sent to every nation. So this is what we are here. This is what we are left with. Surah 16, verse 36, versus borrowing, plagiarism. Which one do we believe? I think we need to be honest and fair and look at each claim, or you could say theory, objectively here. So, did you have anything else you could very quickly share about which contradicts science?
Do you want me to go to specific examples now? The heavens and the earth one?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So my first issue, so we discussed a couple of things, and we decided to just talk about a couple of examples, because whichever one I felt was a good example of a mistake in the Quran. And the first example, which I've made a video on as well, is the example of the heavens and the earth being split. So first of all, what is the samawat, the sabah samawat that the Quran talks about? The Quran says, and we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and we have made from what is thrown at the devils and prepared for them the punishment of the blaze. So, لَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ, right? So Allah is saying that the lowest heaven has stars in it. So based on this definition, many Muslims would say that the first heaven is the entire universe and the entire observable universe. This is not historically what was meant by the first heaven. The first heaven was one of the seven heavens, which was the seven spheres, but that's not my point. That's a totally different point. My point is when the Quran says that the heavens and earth were joined, this to me seems like a mistake. And this is actually a very common motif, as I will demonstrate. Have not those who disbelieved. So the Quran is actually bringing to attention to the people of the time that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, and we separated them and made from water every living thing. Then will they not believe? 21:30. So the interesting thing is that this idea of separating of the heavens and the earth, like, I mean, just imagine you were living back at the time where, there was no modern science. We didn't understand the earth was a ball. There was a few people here and there, like Plato, who thought the earth was a ball hanging in space, but majority of people, they believed in a dome, right? Like a firmament. They believed that the sky was actually solid. And when they used to look up, it felt like they were inside a marble, right? You can think of being inside a marble. And when I was a kid, I used to look up at the sky and I'm like, hey, we're inside like a big ball, right? That's what I thought. I thought the sky was solid. So this was kind of like a naive kind of observational kind of conclusion that even as a child I came up to. And so what we find is in ancient cultures, culture after culture after culture, this motif of heavens and earth being split, from the Chinese to the Indians to the Indigenos of California, this idea of separating of heavens and earth is something that is universal. And it's not actually accurate, because the problem is that the heavens is the sky, the space, and the earth, they were never joined, right? There was never any point where the earth and the sky was joined. What we do know, and what is more accurate, is that everything was made from the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang has been, basically proven multiple ways through Einstein's theory, through the background radiation that they found, and through the Hubble telescope, we know how we see the skies expanding. So, I mean, logically, you can reverse that, and you can see that, it was together, right? So Big Bang is solid. It's quite, quite well established. But we don't find that in any of the holy books, because what they were doing was they were going based on what they understood at the time. And just as an example, what I did is I just made another, like, if I was God and I was writing the book, I would have said something like this, God is he who created the universe from a single point, and he stretched it out and made it into the vast emptiness and darkness. From this darkness, he created the stars. From the dust of stars, he made your home, and that you can live in after a long period of time, or after 9 billion years. But of course, back then that wouldn't have worked. Will you not give thanks? So, I'm just saying that if God was writing this book, like, instead of writing things that matched, ancient kind of flawed motifs, which makes you wonder, like, did Muhammad actually know? So how would you respond to that?
Sure. Okay, so I just want you to repeat one point here.
Mm-hmm.
You said, and again, I might have misunderstood, because sometimes in discussions you can sometimes only get like half the information.
Right.
The way you would have stated it, can you please explain that to me again? You just repeat yourself on that, if you would. How would you have stated it? The Big Bang or something like that?
Yeah. So I just gave an example of one way that could be a better rendering would have been like the one I have here, that God created the universe from a single point, and after a period of time, he made your earth from the dust of stars. So that actually has 3 pieces of information in it that wouldn't have basically scared away any of the pagans, because they used to believe in even more fantastical stuff than that. So this is basically 3 points I made. He created everything from a single point, and then he stretched it out into the darkness. And then from there, he made stars, and then from the stars, he made the earth. So basically, like, instead of heavens and earth, I'm being more specific.
Yeah. Did you said you watched my debate with Dr. Richard Carrier?
Yes.
Do you remember when we kind of talked about the heavens in there?
Well, he was focusing on the whole 7 heavens being Plato's 7 spheres.
Yeah.
And but go ahead, like, do the, because I don't know if everyone's seen that, so maybe just explain it again.
Yeah, if you get a chance, it's a good one. Google my name, Nadirahmed, and Richard Carrier for our discussion, and we talked about this, that when it comes to the heaven, heaven has no definition in the Quran. So what you just said here, that the heaven, first you said the heaven means universe, the first heaven being universe.
Yeah.
Then you said the heaven means sky. All that's conjecture. If you look at the Quran, there is no definition for heaven. In fact, I want to kind of play a little funny video for you, if I may. So this one guy was trying to refute the Quran. He came across this problem that there is no definition for heaven. And then he kind of, let me just play this for you. I think it's going to be kind of humorous. It's kind of funny what he does here, which goes back to my point that these videos about people refuting Islam, well, let me just play it for you.
Okay.
The devils. With this passage is it talks about 7 heavens, but the Quran never defines what these 7 heavens are. The Bible tells us there are 3 heavens.
Did that come out clearly?
Yes. Yeah. He said the 7 heavens, but the Quran never defines what the heavens are.
Yeah. So then he's like, let me tell you what the Bible says the 7 heavens are. And he now uses the Bible to inject meaning into the word of the Quran for heaven, which is sama. That's the first point. The word there is sama. And people translate it as heavens, but when you really look at that, that's just more of a linguistic veneration. All these words you're finding in the Quran, like heavens and firmaments, that's all some kind of linguistic veneration. People are trying to interpret a word which has no definition in the Quran. So, really, from this point, we should drop these words like heavens and firmaments because they're not found in the Quran. They're not in the Arabic. It's just somebody's translation.
Okay.
That's the first point. The second thing is science doesn't use words like heavens and firmaments. If you were to go into your like let's say university science department and you say the heavens and the firmaments, people are going to laugh at you because science, they don't talk like this.
Right.
So I think we need to be very careful with how we use our words there, because these are not words found in the Quran. So really the best we can do if we want to be honest, and remember what you said, that you said, do not project our own views onto the Quran. We shouldn't give it a meaning which it doesn't have.
Absolutely.
So here we see, you are chastising people who are trying to find scientific miracles in the Quran, and really they're just giving their own interpretation on the Quran. So here we see kind of you're doing the same thing. All heavens mean is simply this: variable X. You can't get any more out of it than that. Okay. You talked about some Chinese and Indians and people of the past might have had this idea, but I believe the verse in the Quran was very clear that a messenger was sent to every nation. And so a lot of that message may have been given to them, and thus it was handed down from generation to generation, and of course changed and stuff like that.
Right.
I just want to just very quickly talk about how it should have been written.
Okay, before we get there, can I just ask you,
Sure.
so are you saying that because we cannot define the heavens, therefore, are you trying to say that do you agree with me there's no science in the Quran because the Quran is using language like sama, samawat, sabah, samawat?
Well, it's a matter of consistency. I mean, what if I were to do this? You have to remember, guys, after our discussion of are there scientific errors in the Quran, we're going to talk about scientific miracles in the Quran. And I absolutely believe, and of course I'll demonstrate to you, that the Quran predicted modern science, which was not known back then. But what if I were to do this? Use a word and give it my own meaning of what I think it is. You guys would be shooting me down. You guys would be laughing at me. Samir, it's a matter of being consistent.
Absolutely.
If you are going to attack us, and rightfully so, and I've seen people do this, like, for example, they say, and I raised this in the Richard Carrier debate, that the atmosphere was smoke. There's a verse like that in the Quran.
Yes,
Smoke means gases. Yeah. So my point here, let's be consistent, and let's not give the Quran words meaning which it doesn't have.
So how do you interpret it then? If when the Quran says that we beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and then we made from them that which is thrown at the devil. So the devil's part, basically it's saying that stars are thrown at devils. So when they looked up in the night sky, they used to see the shooting stars. And Muhammad is saying that the Quran is saying that this was shot at the devil. So these are, in another verse it explains that the shayateen used to go up to Jannah. I mean, all of that is theology. But what about the first part of the sentence, which says we have beautified the nearest heaven, with stars? لَقَدْ زَيَّنَا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيهَا. So what's sama ad-dunya? What does that mean to you? Because how do you understand this verse?
Yeah, that's kind of what my position is, that why are you reading science into these verses? I don't think I have
because it says we beautified with stars. So these are observable. So these are things we can actually see, right? So when the Quran says we beautified the heaven with stars, are these different stars that nobody knows about? There's some like invisible stars or something, or are these the stars that we see in the sky?
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
So what I'm saying is a straightforward reading of the Quran, a plausible interpretation, is that when Allah says لَقَدْ زَيَّنَا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيهَا, He's speaking about the nearest heaven, which is, we can say whether it's the entire universe or whether it's not the entire universe. Modern Muslim modern Muslims would say the nearest heaven is the entire universe, which kind of saves the Quran from the seven heavens being the seven planets, because that's problematic. But if so, you would just be completely agnostic about this verse. You would say, I have no idea what this means.
Yeah, I just, Samir, I'm not sure you're understanding me. I mean, once I told you that heavens means variable X, I mean, these are very vague and ambiguous stuff. What if I were to take these vague and ambiguous verses and try to show it agrees with science, and thus this is a miracle? You would be laughing at me. So what you're doing is you're taking a vague and ambiguous reference, and you're trying to show that there's scientific error in it. Let's be consistent. And if something is vague, then leave it alone. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I pointed out with Dr. Richard Carrier, and I think he agreed. We actually, what was really nice about the discussion, we agreed a lot that there's very many vague references people are making a lot of big issues out of.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. So that was my point. That was my first point. Do you wanna continue? Do you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah. So you mentioned that the Quran seems to disagree with a Big Bang theory, but I guess now that we understand that heavens means variable X, which was separated from the earth, there's no science which can agree or disagree with that. That's just all. It's too vague and ambiguous once we understand what the real meaning.
But why would the Quran say that the nearest heaven has stars in it if it's vague and ambiguous? Like, what is this mysterious heavens then? So you're saying variable X contains stars. We look up at the sky and we see stars.
Right.
Now you're saying we don't know what variable X is, but the Quran is kind of hinting that I mean, it's telling you like right up front that X is a container of stars, and we see the stars, so clearly we can understand that X must be, the sky, right? Or literally translated as heavens.
What if my point to you, Samir, is what if I were to do that here? You guys would shoot me down. What if I say the Quran agrees with modern science, but actually doesn't really state it, but it hints at it? You won't accept it, and neither will I.
Okay. All right. So, So, is there anything else you wanted to add on this heavens and earth before?
Yeah. So you mentioned that first of all, Big Bang theory. You have to understand it is it's just a theory. It's not really established science. And there's other theories like the Big Crunch theory. But you mentioned, you kind of, one of the problems I see is not only is there some of the mistakes I see of this. Not only is there just reading science like universe into the word sama. I mean, it's possible, it's plausible, it kind of makes sense, but did the Quran define it like that? Absolutely not. But there's also a fallacy which I see, which is called the on-the-spot fallacy. This is a logical fallacy that occurs when somebody is considering wrong if they can't recite specific data or technical minute of this exact topic. You need to state it like this. This is called the on-the-spot fallacy. The Quran doesn't need to state anything on anything it doesn't want to, or any book for that matter. I also see the fallacy of the ludic fallacy, where you and I asked you to repeat it so I can show everybody.
Okay.
You kind of gave this hypothetical of how the Quran should read to, I guess, pass your criteria. You kind of created this model.
Yeah.
This is called the ludic fallacy. Rules from a hypothetical model, applying it to a real life situation like the Quran. So these are the fallacies which I see, and not just in your material, but when you go back and you just Google scientific errors in the Quran, you will see them making all kinds of these absurdities as well.
Right. Just a small point about the Big Crunch, Big Bang, Big Crunch that we discussed. I just wanted to add that the Big Crunch is basically, it doesn't disprove the Big Bang. You can have the Big Bang and the Big Crunch. Big Crunch basically says that eventually, as the universe expands to a certain point, it kind of falls in onto itself, and then this whole cycle can repeat itself. So it'll become a singularity because it cannot sustain itself, and the gravity just pulls it together and it just goes back into one point. So the Big Bang, I do feel is quite well established. Because one, Einstein, he said that he added a cosmological constant to his theory of relativity. He basically wanted to go by the understanding of the time that the universe was static, that wasn't expanding. And so he kind of made up for it in his formula, and he added this constant, which he called the greatest mistake of his life. Because it turned out that the universe is expanding. It's not a static universe. It's not like which, to the dismay of some atheists, which is a different topic altogether, but the universe is expanding, right? So because the universe was expanding, The other thing that kind of gave more credence to the idea of the Big Bang was the two radio astronomers who, when they were looking, they were trying to do some experiment,
Yeah.
and they kept hearing this noise, right, in this buzzing, this background radiation, and eventually they figured out, well, they didn't know it was background radiation, but eventually they figured out that someone else was looking for the same thing, and these guys won the Nobel Prize because they realized that this is a leftover of the explosion of the Big Bang, right? So,
Well,
this was
not to get too much off topic of what the science behind the Big Bang is.
sure.
Agree that heaven in the Quran is not defined, like that one videotape or that YouTube video, which that guy actually found the same thing. There's no definition for this. Can we agree on that?
Well, I don't agree, but we can agree to disagree, and we can continue.
Well,
I
show
think
me
so.
the
Don't get stuck.
definition.
Okay, so are we done with this point then? Should we continue to the next one, or?
Heaven has a definition in the Quran. Me and Richard Carrier, I thought we all kind of agreed on this. There is no definition. I mean, this is like the third reference I'm bringing you. Remember that one videotape? Here, I want to play this one more time for you.
Sure.
Okay. This guy's looking for the same thing you're looking for.
So I don't know if this guy, I mean, I feel like you're appealing to authority here, and I don't know if this guy is an expert on the Quran, or like, I'm giving a simple, straightforward interpretation that is plausible.
Yes.
And you're giving me some, I don't know who that guy is.
You are right.
Piper, who says, oh, there's no definition in the Quran. Unfortunately, I believe I was thoroughly impressed with Richard Carrier, but he doesn't know he doesn't know the Quran. I don't know if he ever read the Quran from cover to cover. So I feel like when you debate with people like that who don't necessarily understand, Islam or the Quran, they're just coming from a kind of general perspective. Whereas, the definition of the heaven in the Quran, in the context of having stars, is quite clear. I feel that it's what we can see above us, right? And again, if you look at the historical context, the heaven was everything above the earth, right? I mean, that's why they said the heaven and the earth were joined, and Allah raised up Rafa'a samawati wal ard, right? He basically raised up the heavens, right? So
hold on a second.
What is he raising? Like,
I'm a little bit lost here because there's a lot of information I think you're giving me here. Okay. Oh, you just to respond to your one point here. You're right. I am bringing out kooks and quacks. I mean, that one tape I played for you.
Okay.
If you Google scientific errors in the Quran, that was one of his videos. That's my point. You got a lot of people out there throwing out material, and no, they're not well, let's just say they're not the most qualified to be discussing the topic.
Right. So
here's what I need from you. A clear, concise definition, and I want to look up the verse because you went really quick for me, so I wasn't able to look it up. Where is a definition for heaven in the Quran, which you're building your material off of?
Yeah, I have it 67.5.
57.5. Okay.
67.5. Yeah.
67.5.
Yeah, 67.5. So do you? I don't know if we want to get stuck on this point for too long, because there's other points we need to discuss, which I feel kind of. But yeah, okay. Let's finish this up, and we'll just move on to the next point. But go ahead, make your concluding.
You said Surah 67.5.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
I'm gonna just turn it over to my if I may, to my desktop here.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I saw it. It was there. You had it.
You can see my
It was there. You had it up. Yeah.
Can you see? Can you?
Yep. No, I don't see it.
Yeah. Where is it? Okay.
Yeah, now I see it. Now I see it.
Okay. This is a definite. Okay, and we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars. Okay, and we have made from them what is thrown at devils, and have prepared for them a punishment of blaze. Okay, so the definition of heaven, where can I find this? This doesn't define heaven.
Well, it does actually, because it tells you that it contains stars. So
it tells you what it contains, but it doesn't tell you what heaven is.
Well, there's many ways we can look at it, right? I mean, we can look at what the people at the time would have understood by heavens and earth. Okay. They used to believe in two entities. There was the earth, and there was everything else, which was the heavens. Which is why every culture since time memorial would have said heavens and earth, heavens and earth, heavens and earth, because they didn't realize that we are just one little ball in the corner of the Milky Way galaxy, in an insignificant place in the universe. We are not the center of the universe. For the longest time, humanity thought we are the end all and all, of we were the most important species in the universe. And is there a more clear definition in the Quran where it defines anything else? Like, does the Quran say this is what anything else is? Like, can you give me an example of where the Quran defines something else?
Where the Quran
Or
defines.
is the Quran just
Yeah,
vague
like
and
Surah
ambiguous?
4, verse 91 defines the rules of warfare, where it says, if they do not walk away from you, they do not offer peace, take a hold of them and only them, and kill them in war. So the Quran actually defines what an innocent civilian is in Surah 4, verse 91. But let me get back to your point here. You see, the problem we're having here, I said, where is the definition for this word heaven in the Quran? So you jumped out of the Quran into what people believed, but do you see? And those people are not even the Arabs of that time. There were some other people, but we don't define. We're making the same mistake, which that one dude video. I want to play this one video for you real quick.
But doesn't the Quran use the language of the people of the time in a way that they will understand it? Like,
Not
the
pagan.
Quran actually, like Richard Carrier made a very good point, which is the Quran is using language that people are familiar with. It's coming in Lugha Arabiya, and so it doesn't need to define the same words over and over because people know what it means when it says these things, right?
Okay, let me play this for you just one more time real quick.
Like does the Quran define water? Does the Quran say what water is?
Yes, that all here. Hold on a second. Let me just play this video for you here.
Against the devils. The first problem with this passage is it talks about 7 heavens, but the Quran never defines what these 7 heavens are. The Bible tells us there are 3 heavens.
So here's my point.
Uh-huh.
You see, I'm getting pulled in different directions here. You're telling me, okay, here, define heaven this way. This guy wants me to use the Bible to define heaven. You see the problem I'm in here? Like, after I get done with you, if I were to meet this guy, he's like, the Bible says this, and the Bible said that, the Bible said that heaven is this. Everyone is defining it their own way.
Yeah. So does the Quran define it? Does the Quran define book, for example, or water? Does it define any of the nouns it uses?
Well, we have dictionaries. We have the Arabic language, which is intact. So like when we say the word kitab, have you heard the word kitab, which it means book?
Yes.
That's also what it was meant from the Arabic dictionary back 1,400 years ago. So the Arabic language has been rightfully preserved.
Right.
In fact, I know when I was learning Arabic, a lot of the words which we see in the Quran are actually used today. So, but now you're talking about a pretty complex, kind of concept here. That word was never, we don't have a lot of information or verification on what it means. We have a lot of conjecture here. Even back then, they had different understandings of what this stuff was.
Understood. So
it's vague and ambiguous is what.
Fine. Let's move on to the next point because we've both made respective arguments and I feel like we're kind of beating a dead horse. And so it'll be more interesting to our viewers if you continue on with other points, I feel, rather than spend the entire discussion on one point.
Yes,
so my next point I want to make, unless you want to add anything else, or can we conclude this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so the bit, like I was saying, the issues I had, a lot of them had to do with the fact that when I read the Quran, I realized that everything in the Quran is from the perspective of a 7th century man. And it made me worry that what if he actually didn't know better? Because the more I studied history, when I found out that Ptolemy's work wasn't translated into Arabic until much later, when I saw that the tafsir of the times were all basically, using the same, oh, sorry, my screen is not shared. The tafsir of the time was going based on the flawed scientific understanding. And it was only until, much, much later on, post-Galileo, or when Ptolemy's work was translated into Arabic, that we start to see that people started reinterpreting the Quran to be in line with modern science. But before then, like as Dr. Osama Hassan was saying, the Quran, like, it does not actually tell you. Some people thought the heavens were made before the earth, and on Islam QA, a popular fatwa site, you find the same answer. They said the earth was created before the heavens. And he was saying Tafsir al-Jalalain leads us to believe the earth is flat, which is not my argument. But here, let me give you some more examples of things that cause me doubt. the Quran uses language that seems to imply a geocentric view of the world. It says in the Quran that, you know, it talks about the night and the day and how it, you know, it strips them, it takes them from the darkness, and the sun runs up to a resting place. So it talks about a resting place for the sun. And then it says, for the moon, we have appointed, you know, kind of poetically, we've appointed mansions, and it returns like an old shriveled palm leaf. So I think he was talking about the different stages of the sun. And then he says something which is kind of shocking because it's silly. It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor for the night to outstrip the day. They float each in an orbit. So the Quran, you know, is saying that the sun and moon are not competing. Like, it's a very strange comment. If you understand cosmology, this is a very nonsensical, non sequitur. Like it's a nonsensical argument. Obviously the sun and the moon will not overtake each other. They're not even in the same orbit, right? But if you believe that both of them are going around the earth, this verse makes perfect sense. And but what do you think? Like, how do you deal with this type of issue?
Well, yeah, again, you know, really the same thing I'm going to tell you. What if I were to do what you're presenting to prove Quran agrees with science? Absolutely, you will not accept it. All right.
But isn't that what you're going to do, though? Like in the next
These are
discussion?
all vague and ambiguous references. And if I see I don't know if you realize this, and this is what I see in all these videos. You're committing the same logical fallacies that you accuse Zindani and other Muslim apologists of doing. You're taking vague and ambiguous references, which when I look at that, I mean, how you got this model here from this one verse is, you're a very creative person, that's for sure. But all I know, if I were to do that, you guys would be laughing me out of you'd be ridiculing me. So
this model is the ancient model.
How did you get this? The why the sun follows? Okay, the sun. I'm sorry. The verse actually, you said that the sun does not outstrip the moon or something like that.
Overtake the
and
moon,
you said that it seems like geocentrism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me explain. Here's geocentrism is that you got your. Correct me if I'm wrong. You got your Earth, and the sun and the earth both revolve around the earth. So I want
sun and the moon, yeah.
Did I get it right?
Sun and the moon both go around the earth, yeah.
Yes.
And the planets go around the earth, yeah. That's correct.
So I want a clear, explicit verse from you that states in these exact words, and I'll tell you why. The sun and the moon revolve around the earth. Do not imply it. Say, oh, well, I think it means that. Go around the earth. And here's why I'm holding you to that standard, Abdullah Samir. Because I'm up next for proving that the Quran is in perfect agreement with modern science. And if I actually show you a verse from the Quran which agrees with science, but it actually doesn't state it, it's kind of implied, then you will be accusing me of retrofitting the Quran to make it match modern science. You will be accusing me of spinning the Quranic verses, misinterpreting it to make it agree with science. So that's why I want explicitly like this. So you might want to write it down. The earth and the moon both revolve. I'm sorry, the sun and the moon both revolve around the earth. I want it in those exact words.
Well,
same standard now.
Yeah, the thing is, okay, so let's go back to what I said earlier. What I said earlier is everything in the Quran, when I realized that everything in the Quran could have been written by Muhammad, that's when I realized that there's no point believing in this book anymore. So all of these examples show that the burden of proof has not been met, that this is written by a superior being with, knowledge of the universe, al-Latiful Khabir, right? Allah ya'lamu man khalaq wa huwa al-Latiful Khabir. Doesn't Allah know you better? And he's Latif and Khabir. He knows the most subtle things about our existence, and he knows the most biggest news about the universe, right? So this word, I used to truly believe al-Latiful Khabir. He knows the most intricate things. And I used to challenge people, and I used to say to them, give me an example in the Quran that's wrong. Tell me, show me, do this. And eventually, I think, because I converted from Ismailism. I was born as a Shia Ismaili Muslim. And later on in my life, when I was in in high school, I converted to Sunni Islam. And the reason I did this is because I felt that the Sunni religion was basically the correct form of Islam based on the Quran. So when I converted based on evidence, I was a person that was a truth seeker, that believed in following the truth wherever I found it, following the evidence. And so the evidence led me to become Sunni. I became Sunni. I believed in the Quran with all my heart. But this continued search for knowledge and truth eventually led me out of Islam. So when I left Islam, people said, now you shouldn't follow your reason anymore. You should stop following your reason when you become Muslim. And so my reason is telling me that everything in the Quran is authored from the perspective of a man in the 7th century. And so this is my concern. Like, yes, the Quran doesn't say, it goes the earth, the sun and the moon go around the earth. It doesn't say that, but it uses language that implies that over and over again. So this is, for example, one example.
Oh, can I read that real quickly? Because
yep, go ahead. Yep.
Problem is, if there's too many points, I forget the points and I don't respond to them. I maybe it's getting old.
No problem. That's better. Go ahead.
So, it's about consistency, and I think we can agree that it doesn't state that exactly in the exact way how I said it. That the sun and the moon both orbit around the earth. That's not in the Quran. Here's what I see as another fallacy. We kind of talked about the ludic fallacy. The ludic fallacy is you've got these hypothetical models and you say, you try to apply it to real life situations, and sometimes it doesn't work. The intention fallacy, which I see is being committed here, is you are trying to judge a work of art, we can say the Quran here, by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it. So you're trying to judge his intention. I think you're referring to a geocentral universe. I really do. When you use words like that, it kind of means that to me. This is what I'm seeing here. This is called the intention fallacies. So
I'm agreeing. I agree with you in a sense here, and I'm willing to. Okay, so I'm willing to say this. I'm willing to say, I do not believe the Quran was trying to prove that it was from God by giving miraculous scientific examples. The best example of this is the example of embryology in the Quran. I truly believe the author of the Quran was trying to say, look at this beautiful process, how the baby is born, and it grows in stages and this and that, and will you not give thanks? Will you not worship Allah? So it's basically an appeal to the intelligent design argument. It's Muhammad is saying, look around you, look how I created the heavens and the earth, look how the stars are there, look at the planets and the orbits and this and that, and will you not worship Allah and obey Muhammad? And that was the argument. So I'm not trying to say the Quran is trying to say that it's a geocentric whatever. I'm saying that this is just taken for granted, that like Muhammad is just using the information available to him at the time. And the problem is, if you're saying that the Quran doesn't lend itself to science, it's ambiguous, then how can we say the Quran confirms science? Like, at least, Hamza Soitis is being consistent here, and he's saying the Quran, there's no scientific miracles in the Quran. It's a very strong position he's taking. And he's putting a lot of energy, and he's one of the thought leaders of the Dawah movement now. And he's saying there's no scientific miracles in the Quran. This narrative is making more people apostate than convert to Islam. People convert to Islam, they read this, they learn it's not true, and they abandon it, because we're living in the age of information where claims are challenged, and the basically when claims are challenged, basically there's it's easy to kind of debunk false claims. So now you have Muslims saying don't go by this, but at the same time he's saying don't look at the Quran for science. There's no scientific miracles. But I feel like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, if you're saying the Quran is ambiguous, the Quran is ambiguous, Quran is ambiguous, but there's miracles in the Quran when it matches science. But how can you do that? Like, how can you have your cake and eat it too like that?
Yeah. So let me kind of back up here real quick. Just to appeal, I don't know Hamza very well, so I can't comment on that.
But just his argument, let's talk about his positions. Pretend I'm the one saying it.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, my turn has not came up yet, where I will present to you statements from the Quran which agree with modern science. They're going to be clear, and I'm not going to and see what I'm trying to get you to understand here, which I feel like there's a lot of struggle from you, and and you got to change your thinking, because it's about being consistent. You know, James White said, lack of consistency is an example of a failed argument. The stuff you are throwing out at me, if I were to give that to you to prove the Quran is a miracle, you would throw it away. Okay? If I were to say, well, no, it's not exactly worded like that, but it just seems so, like it's a science.
Isn't that the burden of proof argument again? That
Okay, my point to you, what you're not understanding here, okay, and I really need you to think about this. When you say the Quran disagrees with science, it's got to be explicit. It's got to say the earth, the sun and the moon orbit around the earth. It's got to be explicit. Not like, well, it kind of seems like it's saying that. Okay, no, because you're not going to accept that from me, and I'm not going to accept that from you. Let's just, and this is my point, we have to get some consistency here. We cannot read into the Quran what we think it is saying. That's the intention fallacy. Like, oh, I know, you're trying to judge this work of art by saying, oh, I know the real intent of the artist. That's the intention fallacy. I think you're committing this fallacy.
No, but I told you I'm not trying to do that. I'm actually saying that I think the point of the Quran was to get people to worship Allah, not to pay attention to a geocentric whatever, right? That was just an example of where I think Muhammad got it wrong and, like, you know, materialized his incorrect information in the Quran.
Got what wrong?
I'm not saying the Quran is trying to demonstrate. I'm not saying that's the intent of the Quran. I do believe, I agree with you, the intent of the Quran is to get people to obey Muhammad and worship Allah. I agree with you. The problem is, I'm not saying that's the intent of the Quran is to say this geocentric. I'm just giving a straightforward, plausible interpretation, which is what it says. The sun, like, you know, the sun follows the moon or whatever. Like, you know, like in the other example is it talks about the moon following the sun. Like, what does that even mean?
Okay, so let's see. Let's talk about, Samir, what we can agree. Going forward, like, I read this: by the sun and his brightness, the moon follows as she follows. I'm sorry, by the sun and his brightness, and the moon when she follows him. This is something which is vastly open for interpretation and stuff like that. You've demonstrated a hypothetical of what you think it could mean off to the right-hand side. That's all conjecture, is my point. So going forward from this point on, can we agree that if you feel the Quran contradicts modern science, you need to produce explicit, clear verses? And if I say that the Quran agrees with modern science, I need to produce clear and explicit verses. Can we agree on this going forward?
Sure, we can agree on that, and I do have some examples of that. Okay, you want to get into the actual embryology and why I think that's a problem?
Well, are we done with geocentrism, or I guess?
Well, I think there's more examples of geocentrism in the Quran, and like for example, when the Quran talks about how he restrains the sky from falling upon the earth. I mean, this is not geocentrism, but this is another example of someone thinking that, you know, the sky was being held up by, you know, pillars that you cannot see, and then, you know, Allah keep.
Where does it say that in the text that the skies are being held up by pillars?
There's another verse in the Quran.
Where is that assertion you made in the text?
It's there's another verse in the Quran that says it is He who holds up the sky.
No, you said pillars.
Okay, well, there is a verse with pillars in it. I can find that.
The pillars are holding up the sky. Okay.
Yeah, 1 second. That's in actually, I think it's on my website.
Wait, just because you created the sky without pillars. Go back. Can you go back to that?
I have it right here. Khalaqa samawati bighayri amadin tarawnaha.
That amadin is without pillars.
Tarawnaha, yeah, without pillars you can see. This you can see is very important, right? It doesn't say without pillars, it says without pillars you can see. I mean, the bigger problem is not just that it says without pillars, it's that there's no need for pillars. It's a flawed, the whole model is wrong. The whole model of saying that I'm holding up the sky.
Fallacy. You've got this models that you're creating, dude.
But there's no sky to hold up. That's the problem. Like, the sky is just space, right? There's nothing to hold up from falling on you. Even, when Allah says he rafa'a samawat, he raised the heavens, it's almost like they used to believe that this was being held up, like I was saying before, the firmament, the idea of a firmament, which is in the Bible as well, and the Quran.
Slow down. I'm sorry. Take it slow. Again, look at. Yeah, respect my age. I'm a little bit old. My mind is not as fast as
No
the
problem.
younger guys.
Sorry.
Okay, so let's take it from the beginning. So he restrains the sky from falling upon the earth. How does this contradict science?
It's another example. Well, this is another example of a flawed model of cosmology, which was materialized into the Quran.
Where's the model in the Quran that you're assuming?
I'm talking about reality as we know it.
Okay, but that's not in the Quran.
It's exactly, the reality as we know it is not in the Quran, which is why I think it was written by Muhammad.
What we just agreed on just 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, then we're gonna have to get to embryology then, because I think that's a more clear example of actual mistakes.
Okay.
These are examples of flawed understanding of the time. That's basically my issue. My issue was I got from believing.
Oh. Hello.
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 I just lost the connection for half a second. That was scary. Okay. Let me just check in the chat and see if everybody's still. Are we still live? Okay. So okay, it seems like we're still connected. Go ahead. Do you want to?
Okay, Samir, do you understand this? The intention fallacy is trying to judge a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it. And so when you're showing me this model thing here, you're doing exactly that. You are saying that the intent or purpose of the artist is this flawed understanding. Do you see how you're committing these fallacies?
All I'm doing is I'm just making a straightforward reading of the text, and what I'm saying is there's nothing in this text which is miraculous. That's my only point. Like,
we're not talking about that, Samir. We're talking about where the Quran contradicts modern science.
I think this is an example of contradicting modern science, like saying that there's no what is if you're gonna say the Quran is so ambiguous that we don't know what sky means and we don't know what holding up the sky from falling on you means, then I have no disagreement with you that the Quran is so
good. We agree. We agree.
Okay, well, I don't agree, because I do think the Quran is speaking about a very specific thing when it says samawat, but we can agree to disagree. I would agree with you if I agreed with your premise, which is the Quran is vague and ambiguous and is not speaking about cosmology, but the Quran is speaking about cosmology, so I disagree with you.
Well, okay. Here, let me show you kind of what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm gonna give you an example, so which can kind of further kind of guide you as far as what I'm looking for. Okay. I'm gonna share my desktop over here, if I may. Let's see. Just give me 1 second here. There you go. All right. And I think because it'll kind of give you an idea of kind of what I'm looking for here. Can you see my desktop?
No, I was seeing it. Then now I see you now. I had it. You had it a second ago. I think you just closed it.
Let's try this one more. Okay, you should see it now. Can you see my desktop now? Samir, you there?
Yeah. Yes, I can see. Sorry. Yep. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. So again, it's about the same standard. We need to hold the same standard. When I say Islam agrees with modern science, and you'll see other people doing the same thing, you need to show what science says. Science with the reference. Like, for example, this is what the Bible says. This is a scientific error in the Bible. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 17, verse 18. And behold, he has charged her with a shameful deed, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garments before the elders of the city. So the elders of the city shall take the man and chastise him. So this is what is known as the blood on the bedsheet virginity test, which we have seen all throughout history. Okay. Modern science tells us from the scientific reference here I quoted it right over here. Being physically active, especially in a sport like horseback riding or gymnastics, can cause your hymen to break. So we know that this idea of blood on the bedsheet is a flawed idea. Look at the reference from Science I'm Giving and the quotation from Science I'm Giving. Samir, anything less than what I've just presented to you, I'm not going to accept tonight, because here's the reason why. When I show and prove to you, which the time is not yet, that the Quran agrees with science, I'm bringing scientific reference to show the verse of the Quran agreeing with scientific fact. You are giving me your interpretation of science, not from authentic references like this.
Mhm.
And we also know that some baby girls are born without hymens. My reference, medonlineplus.gov. This
Okay.
is how you establish a scientific error. Okay?
So okay. So
So
move.
that's what I'm going to hold you to, because that's the same standard which is applied to me. So
Right.
it's about applying the same standard to both of us. Okay. So now that you kind of know what I'm looking for, do you have anything like that you can share with us?
Yeah. Let's go to embryology in the Quran.
Wait, no, I'm talking about in geology and all of that stuff. What we were just talking.
The
Oh, I'm sorry,
geocentric?
geocentrism. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I haven't prepared anything that would satisfy you, I guess, based on your ambiguous interpretation of certain words which you feel are not, they're not well defined. So you think that sama is not well defined, even though I think it is well defined. You think that when it says the moon follows the sun, or the sky, I keep the sky from falling, these are not problems. And I agree with you that these are actually glimpses into the mind of Muhammad, a 7th century man that wrote things as he understood them. They may not necessarily, I don't know if you want to call it a contradiction or not, but it's definitely a flawed understanding. But I'm okay to move on from that and go on to the next topic.
Well, I tell you what. How many minutes has it been?
It's been an hour.
Oh my gosh. Let's
Yeah.
do this. Why don't we? And here's the thing. This is a learning experience. I'm actually learning from you, because honestly, I couldn't understand what you explained to me today in this discussion just from reading your articles. So that's what's really good. Now I understand how you think, and I think you kind of understand what my expectations are and kind of the way I think. So going forward, we'll take that in mind as we kind of prepare our stuff.
Mhm.
But could we do embryology for a later time, and maybe we can open up the discussion if there's people who have questions and answers? Or
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fair enough. I think you're right. We definitely did go through enough points, and there's enough in this discussion that we've covered for anyone that wants to look into it more. I'll just remind everyone that I have a blog, abdullahsamir.com, where I go into more detail on all of these points. And yeah, if you want to look at the questions from the audience, here's the live chat right now. We'll have to go through and see if there's any. Wow, there's 100 people in here, so it's going kind of fast.
can you have them actually get the microphone and talk?
No, we can't do that. It's
Oh.
not set up for that right now. But why don't we go to the next topic then, if you still have time? Do you want to just end it at that?
Yeah, because I think if we just we're going to do a series of discussions,
Yeah.
hopefully, and I hope you do. We get to talk again. Because I tell you what, most of the people can I share my desktop real quick here?
Yep.
Yeah. So most of the people who
I can't see your desktop.
Oh, you can see it?
No, I can't see it. Now I see it. No, that's my screen. I don't. Oh, now I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we do scientific errors in the Quran, I've actually tried to contact most of these people. Most of these people are just kind of, as I said, they're kind of rude, or they don't want to talk at all, And I've invited them. So it's very hard to find someone who is really willing to defend the stuff he writes on the internet. So here's my email, by the way. If I want you to go and look at some of these videos. If you have any questions, email me, and I'd like to talk to you about it, just like I talked about it with Samir, because some of them are actually kind of thought-provoking. So my email right there, if you can read it, it's na19711990@gmail.com. I just want to throw out my email in case somebody has any questions to me.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So go ahead. It's yours.
It would be awesome if you can also reach out to Hamza Sotis and see if you guys can. That'd be an interesting conversation as well. Yeah. So it's been a great discussion. There's definitely a lot of points. I think we should definitely do another one. Yeah. So like, do see if you can reach out to Hamza Sotis. I think that would be quite awesome. If
And
you can
how would I contact him?
He's in IERA, and I think I can from the blog or on Facebook. He has a profile on Facebook, so you
Sure.
should be able to reach him on there. That would be interesting because you guys have quite different perspectives when it comes to science and the Quran. So it'd be interesting to see. I do feel like Hamza is a little bit of a bleeding edge there, because I feel like the scientific miracles kind of discussion is kind of like, even when I announced this topic, a lot of people were kind of annoyed. They were like, oh no, not this topic again, like can't we talk about something else? Like I feel like people are kind of tired of this narrative, and to me it seems like it's all been debunked already. So that's my perspective anyways.
Here's what I see we have agreement on. Okay. Can you see my desktop?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. This level of accuracy, which I'm showing you right here, where you bring the statement from science, okay, with reference, this is so important, with reference from an edu or .gov, okay, or some respectable institution, not swordoftheLord.com. And then you show the Quran verse which disagrees with science. Look, if you look out there, you will never find any of that. It's all people giving their assumptions. People are reading into the text what they think the Quran is doing. And what I want you to do, Samir, is look at all the assertions you're making on the text before you try to debunk it.
Okay.
And question those assertions and say, should I really be doing that? Or should I just stop? You know, and you made a lot of like, how shall I say, these hypothetical models on what it should state. It should said this, and it doesn't say this. The Quran is wrong. That kind of stuff you won't accept from me. If I made a hypothetical model and I show, look, the Quran agrees with my model, it agrees with science. Whatever pretty much 95 of what you presented to me today, if I were to turn around and give that to you, you're not going to accept it. It's about being honest and consistent. Like James White says, that inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument, and he's right. So yeah, what are the questions we have here?
So hold on one second. Questions. There's a bunch of things. People are saying Romans defeated on lowest land of earth is clear, ambiguous. State one scientific miracle. So we're planning to have another discussion where we're going to get into the actual scientific miracles in the Quran. At that point, we will actually go through the actual. We'll go to the actual discussion on scientific miracles. Someone's asking to ask you, what's your definition of as-sama?
Why don't you, Samir, based on what we talked about, why don't you answer that?
I mean, I have answered that. I feel like
No, from the text of the Quran, what we just talked about.
I feel like I've done that. I've done that over and over again.
What is sama? What is sama?
Sama is the sky, is basically space. It's the universe. It's everything other than the earth.
Oh my gosh, Samir, remember I told you that this is not defined in the Quran?
Yeah, this is why we agree to disagree. I do think it's clear enough.
Let me tell you, you feel that there is an assumption of what sama means in the Quran is what you're thinking, right?
Yeah. Well, how do you define it? That's what the question is.
When the Quran said that he turned to the heaven and made it 7 heavens,
yeah,
that's something we don't understand. And there is there is no definition of the Quran. Now, see, this is what I'm talking. I'm repeating this like a dead horse. If I took an Arabic word and I gave it a meaning which I think it means, and say, there, it agrees with modern science, you're not going to accept that. Just like I'm not going to accept this from you. Okay? It's about consistency.
Okay. How someone's asking, Sohan, how many things are explicitly defined in the Quran? I'm just reading random questions as they pop up. We'll do this for 5 minutes and we'll stop, I think.
Surah 4, verse 75. You see, jihad has been mandated in the Quran, which is fighting warfare, And but why? Surah 4 verse 75 defined and gives you a clear reason why. Inside, this is a clear definition of what, I mean, there's so many things which are clearly defined in the Quran. Surah 4 verse 75 says, for those people who are oppressed and who are crying out, Lord, who will be out there who can save us? That is offensive jihad. That is why we should be fighting for. So there are clear definitions in the Quran for the weak and the oppressed.
Right.
But guess what's not in the Quran? And this is what a lot of people don't know. It says, fight to spread Islam, to punish disbelievers for being disbelievers. That's not in the Quran.
Right.
But anyways, go ahead.
So, do we ever look at the classical meanings of the words sama, for example, in Lane's lexicon, or maybe some of the classical tafsirs like Ibn Jalalain or any of those? Do we? Not Ibn Jalalain, Al-Jalalain. Like, do we ever look at those for hints or clues as to what something may mean, or do we just leave it as ambiguous and we say we don't know?
Yeah, so I think from the position of the ulama, who are the scholars, I think they're going to agree. And I have to bring you a reference for this. That at the end of the day, sama is something which was not defined in the Quran. It's something which we really don't know a whole lot about. But it's people's, and this is maybe where you're coming from. People can say, okay, it's safe to assume it could be universe. It could be, maybe. It seems like it. But then again, it's like, we're just kind of guessing.
So why would God reveal vague verses? Noman is asking that.
Okay, well, that's going to chapter 3, verse 7 of the Quran. Can you see my my desktop here?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold on 1 second here. Quran, chapter 3, verse 7. Okay. It is he who has sent down the book. In it are verses which are precise, like which I presented you, chapter 4, verse 75.
Mm-hmm.
They are the foundations of the book. And there are others which are unspecific.
Mutashabiha, right?
And this also means allegorical also. So there is allegorical verses in the Quran. As for those in whose hearts is deviation from the truth, they will follow that which is unspecific, seeking discord and seeking an interpretation, well, this is in parentheses, suitable to them. And no one knows the interpretation except Allah. But Allah, and then the verse goes on. So now here we see prophecy fulfilled. This is exactly what's happening today. This is exactly what we see all throughout the internet. People are looking at the unspecific mutashabihat verses, and they're seeking some kind of discord or some kind of alternative interpretation. That prophecy has came true even as we speak today.
Okay, so what could be the possible meaning of sama based on the context? Is there anything that you can kind of conclude about that based on the context of the way sama is used in the Quran?
Yeah, so I've researched this. I looked from the scholars. There is no conclusive opinion on it. I mean, it's all guesswork.
But doesn't Ibn Kathir and others define what sama is?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look in the tafasir, they will say a lot of things, but it's not. They will say, "Here's what we think the meaning is," but it's conjecture at best. They didn't cite any reference or any kind of like, okay, based on the Arabs of the 7th century, they understood sama to mean this.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that's a real evidence, and we don't have that.
So what are the possibilities then? Like, they could mean, is there any like possibilities what it could mean at all?
See, that one of the one of the questions is when we talk about and God turned to the sama and made it 7 heavens.
Mm-hmm.
Was the universe already created? Is the sama within the universe itself? We talked about that, I think, me and Richard Carrier. So the universe is already created, but sama is something internal within. And so I can't answer that. I have no idea.
Well, do you not agree with classical tafsir? Like, just wondering, like the tafsir from Ibn Abbas says that heavens is what contains the sun, moon, stars, clouds, and the earth is what contains the tree, mountains, seas. Do we not look at these like just a straightforward interpretation based on what they would have understood? Isn't that fair, I think?
Well, why would you deny
this tafsir? Like, don't you think it's reasonable? Like,
Again, where are his references? You know, anybody who writes a tafsir has to present evidence and references
Right.
to what is affirmation. A tafsir Ibn Abbas is just as good as tafsir Nadir Ahmed. So if tafsir Nadir Ahmed said this, you're going to say, wait a second, Nadir.
That's a bold claim, because these are guys who studied the language. These are the ulama, right? Like the Quran says, ask the
This is a claim which again, we can go to the masajid, we can talk to all the imams. All the scholars are in agreement on that. That everybody must produce evidence, and this is just the way any kind of scholarship is done. It's done with references and evidences to back up your assertions.
So
Nobody, when we talk about tafasir commentaries, this is not God's holy word. Oh wow, look at this. No, this is someone's opinion, and he has to present evidence just like everyone else.
So when these guys speak, though, they're not speaking of their own shahawat. They're speaking based on the large, vast knowledge of the large knowledge, the understanding of the language. The whole lives were spent, right? I mean, I'm not trying to say, I don't want to strawman the Quran and say the Quran must mean what the tafsir says, because I know there's an issue with doing that. Many opponents of Islam will pick and choose which tafsir is kind of like the worst, you could say. But there is a value, I do think, in tafsir, because these are like experts, right? These are basically as good as it gets. Like, these are not just Nadir Ahmed. These are people that studied it for their whole life, that are respected in the community, that people look up to, they're known to be like luminaries, right? But are you saying that all classical tafsir is just worthless?
It's all contradictory. Look, I'll tell you exactly what I say to anybody and what every imam will tell you. Shafi, Hanafi, Maliki, Hanbali, they all contradict each other. And let's say they are Ahmed ibn Hanbal, he was from among the third generation, the best, which Prophet ﷺ said that they are the best generation of people. And it's all contradictory. Their opinions and views and stuff like that. Why do they contradict? They had so much knowledge. They were so blessed. They knew Islam better than all of us. I don't know. This is conjecture.
My conclusion is there's so many contradictions because the Quran and the Sunnah have so many contradictions. This is a sign of a flawed religion that is man-made, and so that's why you have so many sects. That's why you have so many interpretations. It wasn't. I mean, to me that's a red flag.
Well, maybe we can do that. The Quran has zero contradiction. The first thing I want you to do, Abdullah, Samir, we need to understand the definition of a contradiction. Okay, let's go through that. And maybe we can do that one day. Does the Quran contain contradictions, like the Bible is riddled with contradictions and outright absurdities? And that's a very good topic to have. I think the reason why there is so much disagreement among the scholars is because there are things which can be interpreted in more than one way. One word can have many different interpretations, and people feel this is the strongest
one. Right. So I don't know if this is too big of a question, but why do you believe in Islam? Why do you think the Quran is the word of God? Why do you think that Muhammad was a prophet of God? What's your reason to believe in Islam?
Well, there's many lines of reasoning. The first one is what we have seen tonight, that if we examine the text of the Quran and all of that baggage, like what people assume the Quran is saying, and all of those logical fallacies which I've presented to you, we just get rid of all of that and we look at the text of the Quran, we find there is no scientific error in the explicit way, like how what I demonstrated with you, like with the example, blood on the bed sheet, error which we found in the Bible. There are no
okay. So the first thing is there's no contradictions. What else? Is there anything more than that? There's no.
Let me continue, because Prophet Muhammad was clearly prophesied in the Bible, and this is something amazing which even atheists can look at and say, "Wow, that was incredible." Like, for example, in Deuteronomy 18:18, it said he would raise up a prophet like Moses. Moses was a general warrior. He won his battles. He brought a law which was a Torah, and he made hijrah. we find later in history another man doing the exact same thing Moses did. And these are things which like you and I can't do. So like, for example, Muhammad was a general prophet. Muhammad brought a law, as you know, Sharia law. And Muhammad also migrated, made the hijrah. This, in fact, in the James White debate on is Muhammad a true prophet, I looked at that debate and I saw he lost very badly, and Muhammad was clearly prophesied. That was a winning argument from that debate. So that's the second reason. The third reason is because there are statements inside the Quran and as well as the Hadith which do agree with modern science. You know, actually, I presented one of those to the rationalizer, and he accepted, yes, it does agree with science. There are too many verses like that which agree with modern science. So these are the basic reasoning why I see Islam as being the true religion.
Okay, so but how do you know? But you're basing your belief on the Bible, but what if the Bible is made up too?
Bible, like I said, for atheists. So an atheist view the Bible to be an ancient book. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you believe in to be the Word of God or not. This is some ancient book that talked about a general prophet. That book talked about a general. How hard is that to bring? I mean, if you were to go out and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a general. I'm going to raise an army, and I'm going to win somehow," this is not something you and I can do. And I will also claim to be a prophet of God, and I will be successful at being a prophet of God. You know, that's not something you and I can do. That's something Muhammad did. And if you go back, hell, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So if you go back and you look at videos like from David Wood, who you're playing, and you look at Robert Spencer, who was also defeated in debate very badly. But anyways, if you look at their videos, you will never see them address that even. Like go back and go back and show me what you're looking at. Can you?
Oh yeah, I was just received a comment that someone said that that David Wood debunked this claim of
bring him here. Bring him here. Look,
out.
here's my point about David Wood.
Yeah.
Look, it's so easy to talk to me. You can talk to me. We can do a Google Skype discussion, but you will see that David Wood and all these other people, they will run away from the arguments which I have presented to you. And
Right.
and here's what I want you to do, Samir. Can you email I'm sorry, what's his name? David Wood.
Mm-hmm.
And let's have a discussion on them. Why is it just me and you? Why are all your guys running away like and they're hiding in their rat hole today like Saddam Hussein? All you atheists and other people attacking Islam, but only the Muslims are coming forward to debate and defend the truth claims of our beliefs. You
Right.
guys are running away.
Okay, so let's go. Let's finish that.
Wait. Can you email David Wood?
Yeah, I can contact him. We can.
Okay, that'll be a thing I'll put in my calendar to get back with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just following your train of thought. So you believe that Muhammad was prophesied in the Bible.
Yes.
Okay, and so you believe in Muhammad, but why do you believe in the Bible then?
No, it's just some ancient book. It's just some ancient book. And I see that it's pretty amazing that this ancient book, whether it's God or whatever, who is it written by, this ancient book talked about a warrior prophet that will come again, and he's going to bring a law. Can I do that? No. And he's going to make a great grand migration like Moses did. Can I do that? No. I mean, I could try. I mean, I could knock on doors and say, hey, I'm a prophet and I'm also a general. And can you join my army? This is not something you and I can do, okay? So when I see, oh my God, this just happened again, I am very much amazed by that. And I start thinking, wait a second, could this be real? That's not, and that is, nobody has been able to present an explanation to me, not David Wood. And actually, he was asked about that, him and Sam Shimon and other people like that, and they couldn't answer. If so, what's the answer then? That's my question for you. What's the answer of a general prophet giving a law, making a hijrah, a migration, coming again in history? How do you explain that?
How does that, like, okay, so some book mentions that some man is going to come and he's going to be a warlord, sorry, not a warlord, a warrior, as you called it, and he's going to,
Just like Moses.
He's going to migrate or whatever. How does that make him speak to God? Why does that mean he spoke to God? That's just a prediction that someone made.
I didn't say that. I mean, what I'm saying is that's amazing. This is a prophecy coming true. Through deductive reasoning, this book, which is the Bible, which kind of claims to be from God, and here's another book which sort of claims to be God. Well, that's just part of the evidence. So that is evidence number one. Not enough to prove that the Quran is word of God, but once we go into the scientific miracles of the Quran, then that adds to the case. So the case for Islam rests upon Prophet Muhammad being actually prophesied in this ancient book. It rests upon the scientific miracles and the fact that there are no errors in the Quran or contradictions.
Okay, that's a fair fair reason. I don't totally 100% get it. I do feel that people make prophecies all the time. Some are true, some are not true. For me personally, I would expect more than that, just than some book prophesies that a man would come and do these things. Again, humanity, we've been around, like quite a while, and there's going to be examples of people like that. It doesn't mean that necessarily they spoke to God or God spoke to them. I think that there needs to be a little bit more than, because what we're talking about here is, eternal salvation. The Quran says we're all going to go to hell if we don't accept Muhammad. And Muhammad is coming with a book and claiming he spoke to God, and we have to accept him and obey him in every matter, through life and death. To me, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more evidence than just there was a book that, said he was going to come. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that's kind of a straw man you created. But one thing you just said, which you just said that there is examples of warrior prophets who brought a law, like the Islamic Sharia law, and Moses brought the Torah, and who made the Hijrah. There is somebody like that we know of. Who?
But why does those specific points make it true that he spoke to God? Like, there's enough.
No. My question to you is, who is like that in this universe? Other than Moses.
Why like that doesn't prove anything. It's just, you're just saying, okay, there's somebody that meets these arbitrary criteria that somebody invented, therefore this guy spoke to God. Like,
so here's what we're sort of discussing. You see the fact you Amir, I'm sorry, Samir. Is your name Samir?
Yeah.
The facts we can see eye to eye on, but it's the significance of those facts is where we may disagree. There is nobody else other than Moses and Muhammad who fit this description. And James White was defeated in debate on that, and I hope he will recant and accept. Dude, I don't have a great answer for this.
I actually think that most of the great patriarchs, Moses, obviously Adam, Noah. I mean, we didn't even get into the whole we didn't even get into the whole evolution thing, which I think is a big problem in all the Abrahamic religions, which is Adam and Eve does not match. The common ancestry is a big problem. So much of a problem that Yasir Qadhi said it could be like, it could be completely catastrophic for the Quran and Sunnah evolution. But like the whole idea of Moses and Noah, many historical scholars, academics believe that these great patriarchs never even existed. I know for Jesus Christ, there's some debate even among atheists. But Ehrman believes that he was just a Messianic Jew that was killed by the Romans. Richard Carrier believes that there was no such Jesus, and this was a story that was made after the fact. But I don't think there's a lot of evidence that these people even existed. Like let's say Jesus did exist for the sake of argument. But do we even know if Moses really existed? We don't even know that. Like the Bible and Unearthed by Dr. Finkelstein is a great video that kind of goes into that topic. I don't know if you've looked into this, but I think what you would say is, if you had to respond to that, you would just say that, well, we don't need evidence because it's faith, right? It's faith. I don't think you go based on evidence from history, right?
No, I think the Quran has presented itself as a book which you can trust based on the evidence which I've presented you. And there's one piece of evidence I forgot to mention, and this is what we talked about today. The Quran corrects the scientific errors of the Bible. Like, for example, people say, well, the Quran is just borrowing and copying from previous sources. Like the blood on the bedsheet blunder in the Bible. The Quran, both the Quran and the Bible talk about the virtues of being a virgin, marrying a virgin. It's found in the Quran, it's found in the Bible. But guess what you don't find in the Quran? Guess what you don't find in Islam? You got it. The virginity test of the blood on the bed sheet. That you will never find in Islam. So here we see that the scientific error the Quran leaves off. That's just one example. In Surah 25, verse 37, we see once again the Quran corrects the scientific blunders of the Bible. The Bible talks about a worldwide flood, as you know. But science today has debunked that from many different perspectives. Like, for example, even like, let's say from an entomological point of view, just from, I'll quote for you John Hollier. He is an English entomologist, and if you can see my
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, this goes back to my standard here, Samir. I want to make sure that we always cite references. He's an entomologist and ecologist. He lived in Switzerland, and he goes on. Let me read for you his quotation. So far, some 1 million species of insects have been discovered. Did Noah collect the specimens all around the world? Given the havoc that introduced species cause in today's ecosystem, the later seems more plausible, albeit improbable. There is a question, again, of releasing them. So my point here from this article, he shows you just how incredibly ridiculous an ark so big that you're collecting all of these species of insects. So probably not. There's many ways you can.
So my response to that is, well, first of all, the whole idea
my point. I'm going to show you about what the Quran says.
Well, okay, sure.
Yeah, let me just finish that. So, but the Quran does not speak of a worldwide flood. It says, and the people of Noah, when they denied the messengers, we drowned them. Here we see the Quran once again, just like the blood on the bedsheet blunder, the Quran is correcting the scientific errors of the Bible. That's enough proof for me to show, hey, this is a book which we really need to start wondering, is it really true what it states, what it claims to be?
But didn't Noah in the Quran say, don't leave a single disbeliever on the earth? Right?
So
he prayed for the entire, all of humanity to be destroyed.
Yeah, let me get you that verse. In fact, I don't have it with me right now. Moses, I don't know about the Bible, but in the Quran, Noah made a prayer. He prayed, oh God, don't leave any disbelievers on earth, because then they're going to have kids, and then they're going to have kids, and they're all going to be disbelievers. That was his prayer.
Right. I'm not sure if that if I agree with that conclusion, but let's just talk about that a little bit more. Well, first of all, the Guardian comment is free. I wouldn't call that a scientific paper. Secondly, the whole idea of
quoting a scientist, John Hollier,
okay, on the Guardian. Okay, I see. It's quoted there. Yeah, I would say the whole idea of the flood of Noah is just an ancient myth that somebody made up, and it continued as like a broken telephone. There's really very little it doesn't if there was a flood, first of all, like the Quran says Noah lived 950 years. I mean, that already is a fairy tale.
Wait,
and then
I'm not familiar with that verse.
Yeah, it says in the Quran that hold on. Let me see. Oh no, that's not that. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Here we go. So it says, and we sent Noah to his people, and he remained among them 1,000 years minus 50. And the flood seized them while they were wrongdoers.
Yeah, Samir, because it's kind of getting long. Can we make this our last?
Yeah, let's just end it on that. But yeah, my point basically was that the science in the Quran is deeply flawed. Like, it's not just stories of like people that live 950 years, floods that you wouldn't even need to keep the insects if it wasn't a worldwide flood. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. That doctor you quoted, or a scientist, he's basing it on a worldwide flood, right? I mean, otherwise, why would you even need to collect species of insects? They would survive, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, the whole Adam and Eve issue, I think, is a massive problem when talking about science in the Quran. Like, as Yasir Qadhi said, that there's no logical way for a Muslim to contradict this entire account. except by claiming the world story is a fable, right? And then he said such a claim might actually make more sense logically. So, you know, evolution, the common ancestry of Adam and Eve is it's a bullet to Islam, and it completely, you know, dismantles the house of cards that the Quran is. So we didn't get a chance to talk about it, and I think it's something that's worth looking into in the future.
Yeah, let's talk about it next, or our next meeting. We'll lump it in with embryology. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. No problem.
Thank you so much, Samir, for a wonderful discussion. And
Absolutely.
like I said, it's good to see how you think. At least now I understand what perspective you're coming from. I do think that we both need to, especially on my upcoming discussion on how the Quran agrees with science, we both need to make sure that we don't commit the fallacies like the intention fallacies, where we try to judge a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it, as well as others. So
Right.
that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was wonderful. I just want to conclude as well that it was definitely a great conversation. I think we both got a chance to kind of bring out, you know, a few examples that maybe is not totally comprehensive. But I do think in conclusion that the burden of proof is still not met for the Quran to be the word of God. But I look forward to discussing with you in the future again on the next topic. Maybe in a couple of weeks we can schedule offline and try to have that next call.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll go.
Okay. Thanks so much. Take care, Nadir.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Okay, folks, that's a wrap. Apologies that we didn't actually get to, we didn't get to all the points. And like I was saying before, a lot of people didn't even like this topic, this choice of topic, because, the whole dawa, the whole thing about scientific miracles in the Quran, it's an old narrative. It's a dead narrative. It's just a few people still using this claim. The Quran, the science in the Quran is really bad, in my opinion. I mean, you saw the debate, you saw both sides. My perspective is, even Muslims now is saying, forget the science in the Quran, at least forget the scientific miracles in the Quran. Don't even read science into it, because it's a problem, right? Like, why do you think that Hamza Switches left this whole thing behind? Because he was realizing this is a losing battle, right? Like, you can't win this game, because the fact is that the scientific community is actually looking in the Quran, and they're seeing that this whole thing, and it never was the point of the Quran anyways to bring science into it. It was just Muhammad saying what he knew at the time, going by what he understood. And some people are saying, oh, you won this and that. It's not about winning. Like, guys, it's not a cheerleading contest. Like, let's look at it as a learning experience. The whole point of like, normally when you have debates, each side, you get cheerleaders on each side would think that both sides won. And it kind of sucks when you go and like, one day I was in university and there was a debate between an atheist and a Muslim, and some guys told me the atheist won and some guys told me the Muslim won. I'm like, that's how debates go. People have their own biases, right? So let's try to, let's try to be fair. Let's try to look at the evidence, and we'll have another conversation going forward on the miracles. Nadir has some scientific miracles he wants to present, and so we'll bring those out in the next video. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good day or night. Take care. Bye bye. And yeah, don't forget, check my blog. Don't forget. Oops. And yeah, subscribe as well. Okay, bye.